Good afternoon. Today I'd like to follow up on my sermon from yesterday when I preached about reconciliation. Unfortunately, reconciliation seems to be a lost art. It's not easy. It seems as though we would rather just cut ourselves off from the other person and remove our relationship with them from our lives. Now, in my sermon yesterday, in order to explain how reconciliation can work, I used the example of a man named Joe who stole pink flamingos from the yard of his neighbor Beth. And I use this as an example to explain the process for how to restore a relationship. Both people, both the one who stole the flamingo and the one who had the flamingo stolen from her, both people carry responsibility for working toward reconciliation. This is the ministry that Christ has given to us. Now, in my sermon, I suggested a process or steps that we can take along the road to reconciliation. But the process is more complicated than what I had time to explain in my sermon. So today I'd like to pick up a few of those side trails. First, the process of reconciliation is rarely as straightforward as I outlined in my sermon, in which one person offends another person. Relationships can be complicated. And the more history you have with each other, the more complex your relationship is. It's rarely as simple as one person offending the other person. There frequently are multiple offenses in both directions. So it's not just about Joe stealing Beth's flamingo. Maybe Beth also lets her dog poop in Joe's yard. Maybe Joe uproots Beth's daffodils in a marigolds. But even though the process is more complex, it still works. It just has a lot more moving parts. You may find yourselves on both sides of the process at the same time, both as the person who was offended and the person who caused offense. And the process of reconciliation usually involves more people than just the two at the center of the issue. There are family members, there are neighbors, there's coworkers, and so on. The second thing I'd like to talk about today. Can you forgive someone who doesn't apologize? Well, the answer is absolutely, definitely yes. Even if someone doesn't ask for forgiveness, or even if they don't realize they offended you, you can forgive them. And when you do, that is an indication of the size of your heart. And for this, we have Jesus as an example. He extends his love and forgiveness to us even before we realize that we need it. However, while Beth may be able to forgive Joe for stealing her flamingo, her forgiveness does not mean that their relationship has been reconciled. It only means that she's not holding it against Joe that he stole the flamingo. Beth may still feel the need to protect herself from him. Maybe she'll hire a security service to make sure Joe doesn't steal any more flamingos. She might be a bit more guarded around Joe because their relationship has not been reconciled. Protecting yourself from someone who offended you doesn't mean you didn't forgive them. It simply means you don't want to be offended again. Finally, sometimes two people who are in conflict aren't able to work out reconciliation on their own. Emotions flare up. That makes it hard to hear the other person or find a way to reach an agreement. So they may ask a third person to be their mediator. And this is certainly biblical. Matthew chapter 18, verse 16 says that if you're trying to work something out and you can't, bring one or two other people in to help. And sometimes that is our role as agents of reconciliation. We are called upon to be mediators. So maybe Joe and Beth ask their neighbor Nick to help them hear each other and understand each other. Perhaps, for example, Nick needs to remind Beth, Joe took your flamingo. He didn't burn down your house. The most important thing, though, for Nick to keep in mind is that he is there to mediate and not to take sides. And that would be the most natural thing in the world for him to do. It's what psychologists call triangulation. It would be natural for Nick to fall into a 2-against-1 situation where he comes into the conflict and takes sides. And both Beth and Joe are going to try to rope Nick into agreeing with them and ganging up on the other person. Maybe after talking with Joe, Nick will say, you know what? I agree with you. Beth's flamingos are a real eyesore. They're hurting our property values. They're a traffic hazard because people are distracted by them. You know what? Let's the two of us go over tonight and steal 3 or 4 more of her flamingos. Or Nick could side with Beth, and after talking to her, he could say, you know, you're right. Joe really shouldn't be taking your flamingos, and he's been stealing my garden gnomes too. Let's the two of us go over and give him a piece of our mind. If Nick falls into either of these 2 traps, he is no longer acting as an agent of reconciliation. He's only making matters worse. But if he can help the 2 people who are in conflict to understand each other and to work through their issues, then he is being faithful to Christ's call to all of us to share in his ministry of reconciliation. Would you pray with me, please? Lord, I suspect each of us right now can think of a situation in which we have been offended. Maybe with a little bit more thought, we can think of a time in which we have caused offense to another person. We may even be able to recall times when we've been called upon to be a mediator, to help 2 other people work out their problems. For us to faithfully follow you in any of these positions, we need your Spirit at work in our lives, Lord. And so we call upon you to send your wisdom so we truly can be the agents for reconciliation that you call us to be. Amen. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again later.